Hello, we're here to interview Lloyd Harder, the owner of Foundation Pros of Winnipeg. And my first question, Lloyd, what prompted you to go into doing foundation work?
Well, we've been doing foundation work in the family since before I was born. My dad came into Winnipeg and began building concrete footings and walls and pads and foundations for multiple different builders, and over the years he discovered lots of flaws that just subpar construction that didn't really fit in with the terrain that we're building in and the temperatures that we build in. And growing up and hearing these stories and watching my dad build this stuff and myself just kind of falling into it as as I progressed into years and realizing that it's enjoyable. And one of the first memories in my life is the smell of concrete and mud and building and hearing machines run and dump trucks moving around. And
It's called action, right?
yeah, that's for sure. That's right. Yeah.
Well, you learned, in other words, from the ground up. Pardon the pun.
That's true. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it got into my veins and into my nostrils real quick, and by the time I was graduated, I thought that it wasn't my future because it came so easy. So I searched motorcycle and vehicle mechanic repair type of thing, and got a bit of a degree in that and started pursuing that when I soon realized that working outdoors and working on foundations and concrete and
That's where it's at.
Yeah, even building homes and that type of thing was the key. So we continued on with that same sort of trade with my dad, and he was just basically called Harder Construction, Harder Concrete kind of thing. And as I blended in and started to take it on, we were doing lots of new build construction and that type of thing. So we could do foundations and we could build new build. I've done lots of new builds with like in and around the city and other parts of Manitoba, and building came rather easily. And realizing though that the foundation was, of course, the key to this thing. And most of the time when we found any home in and around Winnipeg, it required foundation work, and realizing that the other companies didn't seem to care or didn't seem to have the ability to be able to perform the tasks needed to 110% these things for long term. And that's where we decided that we're going to focus on this as a service to provide kind of unfailing product, because we won't jeopardize our product over the job or over the cost of the job or that type of thing. If somebody only wants to spend this much money, it doesn't mean that we're going to cut a bunch of corners so that they can still get the finished product. We're just going to take it to that point. We'll advise them that this is what they'll get, and often the project isn't rewarded to us because of that. Or often most homeowners can only go a certain distance because it's just not in the budget. It's unfortunate that foundations are built even to this day to subpar. The City of Winnipeg building code, for example, is only allows whatever you want as a backfill. If you were to look at the PDF on the back of a building addition for the City of Winnipeg, is a very common place to find the building code for backfilling. It requires 6 inches of rock over top of the 4-inch perforated weeping tile. Those two things are mandatory. After that, the building code says backfill. So you could use 6 cars if you want to, or your neighbor's propane tank, or decks. They don't care, as long as it's backfilled. So
I didn't know that.
What?
I didn't know that.
So the building code is beyond antique. It's age old. I don't know where it came from to begin with. The other problem is that we get rain in October and we get frost in December, and the moisture goes down into this dirt that they piled up against the house wall. And what does it do? It expands, and then on top of that, then it freezes. And what is water being the only element that expands when it freezes? It expands against the house wall, cracks the wall.
So
it's the only element that I know of Yeah.
So that means there's a very good chance you've come across some jobs that were very challenging. Which one do you think would be the most challenging that you've
Well,
done?
probably the most challenging really is the environment or the weather. Our job is basically a walk in the park from January and the months prior, but the only month that seems to be the real doozy is October, and the reason why is because it rains. And it just seems like, you dig a hole in October and it rains. And kind of not unlike insulating a building, if you put insulation into it, it'll rain. It's sort of the same experience when we were doing a lot of building, but
Yeah.
the only real challenge is the moisture. So what we find when we excavate is we make a low spot that day so that we have a place to put our sump pit kind of thing immediately, because the rest of the year, like in January, February with snow and frost, and it's no problem, you sweep it off.
It's steady.
That's right, you sweep it off and you come back the next day and sweep it off, and you can get back into it without it being, it doesn't destroy anything. So
Yeah.
so the weather, the rain is the real challenge. But
Wow,
only in that
that's an
month.
interesting answer. Would you ever recommend just repairing a foundation from the inside? If somebody thought, oh, well, it's not in a spot where it's a big concern, it's not a big crack, but it does leak, would you recommend that they do it just from the inside?
Recommend or allow, I'm not too sure where to really draw that line. The thing about it is the crack came from the outside because of the moisture expansion and the frost, typically.
And that's something some people don't think about.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. And the mud is a substrate that, it's a medium that holds moisture very well, especially once it's compacted. And you could dig a hole and backfill it, and within weeks you'll have nothing but a big hole. But for some reason people get keys to a brand new house and the mud never sags, so that just means it's been compacted very well. So that soil is very compacted around the house. It gets moisture in it, and then what does it do? Well, it swells up, expands, it becomes heavier. The 50 tons of mud becomes 80 tons of mud, and this is all the way around the house. And when you add frost to this, it's going to crack it, and if you do not excavate the soil from around your house and replace it, you will have nothing but trouble. It's a guarantee. It's just a matter of time before we're there.
Well, the answers you've given to my first few questions kind of answers this next question. What is unique in your approach and recommendations and repairs of foundations? You basically have covered that,
Yeah,
but you could add to it if you like.
for sure. By not having a swaying opinion in regards to the foundation, when we estimate a job, we don't estimate you from your pocketbook. We estimate from the problem at hand. So we look at the issue, we look at the house. Our love is for the home first and foremost. In our experience, we've communicated with investors from Toronto, we've been communicated with investors from Vancouver, and the first joke around the table is the foundations being garbage. They're not really, but I mean, that's kind of the first joke around the table, that the people won't invest in this community because of the fact that the foundations they're swaying, they're swaggering, they're not in the situation or the position that they are in their hometown, being Vancouver or Toronto. Of course, you get people from Toronto even that try and sway the opinions on television for people, unfortunately, that live here where we actually get frost. Like, we get frost.
Well,
Toronto,
yeah,
Toronto gets some cold weather for sure. I'll give them that. And they get 3 feet of snow for a couple of weeks, but they do not get, and they probably don't even understand what minus 40 is.
Well,
minus 15 is understandable.
Yeah,
40,
they don't get it either as far
Yeah.
as the type of soils that we have here in the
yeah,
Red
that
River
too.
Valley.
That's right. And then the time of the year that we get
Yes.
the rain,
Yeah.
is also a combination. You get this October rain,
Yeah.
December, January frost, and it goes hand in hand real quick. So
The-
our concern is, just the foundations in Manitoba being recognized as kind of subpar across the board. It even drives investors out, and that's unfortunate because people run from problematic issues. They
Well,
want-
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money they have to invest, and they
That's for
don't
sure.
know what can happen.
No, that's right.
And if they-
It's surprise.
If they don't understand, I know in my travels, people just don't understand the principle of the kind of soil we have in the bottom of the Red River Valley. You got the clay, it expands when it gets wet.
That's for
If
sure
it
it
gets
does.
too wet, it's soupy,
That's right.
When it dries, it
Liquefaction.
shrinks.
Yeah,
Liquefaction,
right.
that's a good
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
And they just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I have somebody from out of town, I explain to them the kinds of soils we've got here.
That's for sure.
Because they've
Yeah.
got to know, and then get an inspection, and then most times the inspector will reiterate that issue, which I'm really pleased with.
Hopefully, that's right,
Yeah,
yeah.
most
Most of the
times they
time,
do.
that's right, yeah.
So it's good. So, how large of a staff do you have?
Well, most of the time we run with subcontract crews that are capable of excavating cleanly without any issues. Of course, they're insured and workers' comp covered, but those are the kind of the things that we look for. And then people that are committed to that industry is also a necessity. So typically we work with the same group of guys over and over for the sake of being able to speak the same language and understanding what
They
each other.
know what you want,
That's right. So it's
and you know what they can give.
that's for sure. Yeah, that's right. And we know kind of where our boundaries are price wise, which way it goes, and
Well, it's called a
everybody.
relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And people understand that, and that's kind of what you want, is somebody you can understand. So typically that is our staff, and those are our
Yeah,
employees.
that's a good way to do it, I think, because,
Yeah.
they're flexible.
Everybody's good at something.
Yeah.
As opposed to using somebody who's new to it,
Medium,
doing a
yeah.
job they don't understand, and this way it's,
Or you have to breathe down their neck to make sure it's done right.
that's right. Yeah, this way you know it's gonna
Don't need
take
that.
20
So-
hours of effort, and then it's gonna be done. So it might be 3 days, it might be, but you can pretty
Fewer,
much,
fewer headaches.
yeah, you can pretty much set your calendar to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what do you think the future looks like for Foundation Pros?
Well, it's gonna be busy for sure.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's a problem really because of the fact that backfilling is still done with mud. It's still done with the same old stuff they call Manitoba gumbo, which everybody seems to think it's some spectacular substrate that doesn't, liquefaction when it gets wet is one of the problems. It just slips apart, and it's a real dilemma. It doesn't have any integrity to it at all. And people are using this. The City of Winnipeg building code is allowing it to be pushed up against the building. Then houses are mostly being underpinned, and with this underpinning, the builders believe that anything below the piles doesn't really require any attention, so they're even becoming less interested or less capable of doing a quality job on the weeping tile. And we find that weeping tile in homes is probably the #1 reason for the collapse to begin with, and then the mud backfill. It seems like the lack of weeping tile or the improper installation of the weeping tiles from day one, and then of course the mud backfill is the combination. And I would put my next paycheck on 75% of the homes in Winnipeg don't have proper weeping tile.
Well, it's such an interesting thing you just mentioned to me, even before we started this video, was that, well, of course, I've known this for a long time. People feel that if a house is piled, that solves pretty much anything that can happen.
Yeah, no, unfortunately,
Yeah.
that would be a wonderful delusion, but yeah, it's not.
Doesn't work that way.
No, that's right. The weeping tile is still key. And I mean, some pits are wonderful, but I still believe in the City of Winnipeg catch basins. The some pit doesn't work, and the 3 monsoons that we might get in a year, the power goes out. So what do you got? You got a sump pit that's not working. So it's nice to have that sump pit, over the drain or spill over to the catch basins. You got to maintain that catch basin. It's good to maintain the sump pit like twice a year, spring and fall. Make sure that it's plugged in. It's not the iron that's plugged in instead of the sump pit. That's an often thing, or something else is plugged in and you thought it was the sump pit. And the other one we find is a Dollarama bag floating around on the floor, or a Safeway bag. The small little bag gets caught up in a little bit of moisture and it runs over to the drain, and it sucks into the catch basin. And next thing you know, you don't have a drain. Your basement's full of water for a 5-cent bag, right?
Yes, yeah, and people forget that, don't
That's
they?
right, yeah. It's so easy for it to be overlooked, and the basement isn't a place where you normally go. So people don't spend quite as much time. They're more.
They don't stop to think about it.
No, that's right. Between the front door and the kitchen is kind of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the yard. So.
That's right. That's the common territory, and then those other places get neglected, and that's where foundations get left behind and quickly.
Well, listen, I've gotten quite well educated here. Thanks for your time, Lloyd.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, talk to you later.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.